Good Sunday morning to you. Ahead today on Face the State. Supporters of Issue 1 erupted in cheers Tuesday night when Issue 1 on reproductive health and abortion rights passed and will be in the Constitution. Also, a big victory for supporters of Issue 2 legalizing recreational marijuana. Today, our experts break down the votes and what put the issues over the top. Plus, an election night victory for one man was an historic one for him and his city. Hear from Michael Bivens on what it means to him to be Whitehall's first black mayor. Thanks for joining us for Face the State. I'm Doug Petcash. Voters told us Issues 1 and 2 were the two biggest items on the ballot on Election Day that drew them to the polls. Both measures passed with solid majorities. Issue 1 establishes in the state constitution an individual's right to one's own reproductive medical treatment, including abortion. Issue 2 legalizes recreational marijuana use by adults. Let's take a look at the numbers. Nearly 3.9 million Ohioans voted in Tuesday's election. 57% of them voted yes on Issue 1. 43% voted no. The percentages turned out the same on Issue 2. 57% voted to legalize recreational marijuana use. 43% voted against it. Governor Mike DeWine and the First Lady came out strongly against Issue 1, appearing in an ad urging people to vote no. 2 days after voters approved Issue 1, the governor said, quote, "In this country, we accept the results of elections." Governor DeWine says he believes a majority of Ohioans want to see exceptions for rape and incest in any law restricting abortion, which the heartbeat law did not have. When asked if he will advocate to proceed with passing or repealing any abortion-related policies, he said this.
I think it would be a mistake for me to put a timetable on anything. I just think that, you know, this will play out like every issue plays out. And, you know, people will decide if they're comfortable with what we voted on, or they'll decide that it maybe needs to be changed or tweaked. I think, you know, that debate will bubble up.
This morning, we have two experts to provide analysis on what happened with the big issues. Daniel Birdsong is a senior lecturer of political science at the University of Dayton. And joining me here in studio is David Niven, political science professor at the University of Cincinnati. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here this morning. First of all, David, let's start with Issue 1. What do you think about the difference in the percentage of vote, 57 to 43?
Well, I think it's a fascinating example of a situation where this is exactly what the polls said. This is exactly what polls have said for years in Ohio, that a majority of Ohioans basically support abortion rights, and it's actually a very small minority who would favor a complete ban on reproductive rights in Ohio.
Turning to Daniel now. Dan, what do you think put this vote over the top for supporters?
Well, I think if you look at the electorate, if you take the exit polls, for example, the electorate was more female than male as a comparison to the census figures. So that was one thing. And I think almost 50 or 60% of the electorate was dissatisfied or angry about the Roe decision from the Supreme Court. And so they were energized, certainly, and organized, and that makes a big difference come elections.
And David, now that this will be in the Constitution, can lawmakers do anything about it?
Well, it really returns Ohio to the status we had when Roe versus Wade was in effect, that there's a basic fundamental right here, but that doesn't mean states can't make laws around that right, you know, the logistics of that right, the practicalities of it. So that's really very similar to where we were before the Supreme Court intervened.
Would it take another amendment, basically, to override this amendment?
To fundamentally undermine reproductive rights would take another amendment. And that one of the interesting things about issue 1, the legislature obviously disagrees and, is rather extreme in its opposition to abortion rights. They would need to go back to the voters. The only way to undo this is to put this question to the voters again and ask the voters to undo what they just did.
And we'll see if that ever happens in the future. Now, Daniel, the Ohio House ProLife Caucus, comprised of 27 representatives, issued a statement saying they will do everything in their power to prevent our laws from being removed based upon perception of intent, referring to the wording of the ballot measure. So what can they do in their power?
Yeah, so I think what David was just talking about is trying to put up kind of restrictions or barriers, perhaps targeted towards the doctors and what they have to do when treating women. And, it just goes, there's going to be like a death by a thousand cuts kind of maneuvers here, where they're really trying to kind of play the long game, right? A pregnancy happens on a very specific timetable. And if they can slow that down, it makes it harder for women to get an abortion if that's what's necessary.
So that's what the Republicans said on this. Also, just on, let me see, Thursday, Democrats in the State House introduced the Reproductive Care Act. It would repeal existing statutes related to abortion care, and it would add protections for patients and providers. David, why take this step when rights will be enshrined in the Constitution?
Well, there's basically two paths. Sort of the easy, simple way would be for the legislature to repeal existing laws that conflict with the state constitution. The harder way would be to take it to the courts, just because that would be long and drawn out and contentious. Ultimately, there's absolutely no question that Ohio's current laws conflict with Ohio's constitution. So it's one path or the other. It's really a question of whether Ohio's Republican-led legislature wants to do this the easy way or if they want to drag this out.
And Dan, going forward, this will take effect in 30 days or so. Do you know the process of what has to happen for this to become an official amendment and then take effect?
So it says in the Constitution, or the language, that it's self-executing, right? So in the 30 days, then it should go onto the books, as it were. And then that's, I think, why the importance of the legislature to act, as David was saying, with the two paths. Are they going to make it easier, or are they going to kind of play the harder game? And I think that's essentially where we are, right? Does the legislature move kind of recognizing the will of the people and how people think about this issue?
Switching now to issue 2, David. In 2015, not a single Ohio county voted in favor on their total votes per county by county for legalizing medicinal and recreational marijuana. So what changed in 8 years?
Well, the culture changed. One thing that we've seen is states around Ohio legalized, and the conversation changed. Second thing that changes, we have medical marijuana. So it's far less of a revolutionary idea to see legalizing marijuana. And then the third big thing is that issue specifically created marijuana monopolies. And so a lot of the attack on that was whose pocketbook was going to be lined, whereas this was closer to a pure question of whether you favor this being legal or not. And there's also just, generational change. One thing the polling showed very clearly, younger voters overwhelmingly were in favor of this. They don't see why this is even an issue, and that was reflected in the vote.
And Daniel, this is a statute, not a constitutional amendment. Can lawmakers tweak, change, or outright vote this down?
I think they've already indicated that they're going to move perhaps on the cultivation of marijuana. So they can kind of tweak around the edges as they see fit. For you, David, despite virtually identical totals, 57 to 43 for both issue 1 and issue 2, the county by county breakdown is somewhat different. Do you think, or how does that factor perhaps into what the Republican dominated legislature might do on issue 2?
Well, it really does show you a split. There were counties like Delaware County where issue 1 did far better than issue 2. Then there were counties, really rural parts of Ohio, where issue 2 did better than issue 1. So it's really a question of the kind of Republicans that you see. The more suburban Republicans, much more open to reproductive rights. The real rural areas, much more, open-minded on the marijuana question, and more kind of orthodox Republicans on reproductive questions.
And finally, Dan, what do you see in terms of how issue 2 and legislation with it will go moving forward, and what should we expect?
So I think what you'd expect is maybe the piecemeal approach to the issue. If you looked at kind of the breakdown on ideology in the polling and the exit polls, far more conservatives supported this much more than issue 1. So there is some support among conservatives around the issue of marijuana and marijuana use for recreational purposes. And so I think, there's probably some really interesting ways of thinking about it with respect to public safety. Certainly that can be addressed of how they're going to police the use, and then perhaps the increase in, the possible increase of DUIs, but in this case being on marijuana rather than from alcohol. So really the policing of the effects of this will be where they should focus their attention.
And we know the taxation will be 10% on top of the regular sales tax, and we'll see how the regulation part plays out, as well as when all the retail can roll out as well. Daniel Birdsong at the University of Dayton, David Niven with the University of Cincinnati, thank you for your expertise this morning. Really appreciate it. Thanks for coming in. Well, this week on Wake Up CBUS, 10 TV's Tracy Townsend looked ahead to the economic impact of the passage of issue 2, legalizing recreational marijuana. She talked to Katie Kramer, the executive director of the Ohio Statewide Development Corporation, which helps small businesses get financing.
So first, let's start with the winners and losers from the passage of issue 2, Katie.
Sure. Well, at the Ohio Statewide Development Corporation, we help small businesses access loans to be able to grow, invest, and be part of the Ohio economy. One of the things that we're excited about from issue 2 is that the law is going to create something called the Social Equity and Jobs Fund. This is going to help traditionally underserved, disadvantaged business owners have access to loans and grants that will help them access licenses to be one of those new recreational use distributors. Okay. This is something that is really going to help them have access to a new economy.
Cons?
What's going to be hard is that most small businesses receive the majority of their funding from federal programs, like the Small Business Administration or from the USDA. All of those programs are off the table for any cannabis-based business. Okay. So if they need help to be able to invest, they're going to have to seek other types of financing from specialized programs.
All right, so people who would hear about the agency that you represent might recognize the names of some of the small businesses. What does it mean for all of us as consumers now that this issue has passed?
Well, one of the things that I think is great is that the tax rate on adult recreational use for Ohioans is going to be lower than other states. And it will be comparable so that consumers can access it, as well as small businesses being able to access this economy. We're hopeful that we can see even more specialized programs like what we've seen created in Colorado or Maryland or even in the city of New York to be able to help these small businesses grow locally and really contribute to our economy.
Still ahead on Face the State this morning, making history in the city of Whitehall while on a quest to make a difference and a lasting impact on its people. Welcome back to Face the State. Tuesday's election was an historic one for the city of Whitehall. Voters made Michael T. Bivens Whitehall's first black mayor in the city's 76-year history. Mayor-elect Bivens is currently the Whitehall city attorney. He says when voters elected him to that post, he became the city's first African-American elected official. But while he's making history, he really wants to make an impact in his new role as mayor. I talked with the mayor-elect about being Whitehall's first black mayor, what he wants to accomplish, and how he got here.
The fact that the voters decided to put me into this position, I'm extremely humbled by it. And I come into this moment very reflective reflective of my past, reflective of my family, but more so reflective of the people that are coming into Whitehall, not only the young, but the established residents and those who have been here for 70 plus years, to be an example of the fact that Whitehall has not rested on its laurels. It's always been able to change, and I'm a beacon of light for that change. And I'm excited and humbled by it.
Do you see yourself as, in a way, as a role model?
Absolutely. I always have and always will. Ever since I've served in the United States Marine Corps, I've considered myself to be a role model, just with the oath of office that we took there, the oath of office that I've taken from being a lawyer, and now the oath of office that I took from being the city attorney, and even volunteering down at the schools. Everything that I do is, I consider myself to be a role model and an example to others, and I carry that on my shoulders, and I love it. I embrace it.
So what's going to be your top priorities as mayor?
I want to continue the development that's currently underway, but more than that, I also want to attack our poverty rate in the city of Whitehall. We're hovering right now at about 21%, and one of the main goals by 2028 is to reduce that by 10%.
How do you do that?
By creating strong community partners. We have an example right now with Discover that has now come into the city of Whitehall, and one of the objectives of this business is to actually recruit Whitehall residents as its business plan. So the fact is if they lead the way of doing that as a major corporation, then the other corporations that will ultimately attract to the city, if that's their model and they're attracting those people from the city of Whitehall, then that's how we reduce the poverty rate here. Not only that, but also attracting workforce development partners like the African American Male Wellness Agency and other workforce developers to actually get into the city, let them know, and create pathways of exposure so that people find their great best next. Because we're landlocked at 5 square miles, so we're always going to be a small city. But we also want to be able to give every single resident in this city big city opportunities so that they can experience all of the fullness that it is of being a citizen in this community.
Biven says he grew up in a single-parent household and spent more than a year homeless. He says he's risen to where he is today through hard work and with support.
It's interesting when you grow up in that type of lifestyle and you know how to handle those resources. It doesn't feel like poverty. It doesn't feel like downtrodden. You roll with what you have, you work with it, and if you have a mother like mine who was just fantastic and was able to weave a lifestyle for me and a vision for me that made me believe that if you work hard, if you stress education, if you're an honest person, and if you keep your head on straight, then every opportunity is available to you. And here I am today.
And here he is today. Mayor-elect Bivens is a husband and father of 2. He's also an avid fisherman. Check this out. He says his proudest fishing moment was landing this 6-foot shark while fishing from the beach. He did release it back into the ocean. Bivens will be sworn into office as Whitehall's mayor on December 31st. Still ahead on Face the State, 2 men who have faced terrible loss talk about saving lives on our roads. 10 TV's Dom Taberry and Governor Mike DeWine talk about the positive impact the state's new distracted driving law is having in a short amount of time. On October 5th, police in Ohio were able to start giving tickets for distracted driving. Earlier this year, Governor Mike DeWine signed a bill into law making things like texting and driving illegal. Our Dom Taberry joined the governor at a news conference on the day enforcement of the law kicked in. Last year, Dom testified in support of the law. Dom lost his daughter Maria in a distracted driving crash in 2013. Maria's message was created in 2016, and Dom has delivered her message to dozens and dozens of schools all over Ohio in the hopes of saving lives on our roads. Governor DeWine also lost a daughter to a car crash in 1993. Recently, Dom and the governor sat down together at the governor's residence in Bexley to talk about the impact the new distracted driving law and Maria's message are having.
We know that we're saving lives out there every week. We know that distracted driving is a huge killer in Ohio. And this is something that, has changed in the last 20 years. We have people on their devices and all kinds of things. The law is a teacher. And when the law passed 6 months ago, went into effect 6 months ago, it really sent a signal to people, hey, this is important. Put your phone down. And even though we were not criminally enforcing it, just giving warning tickets the first 6 months, but we saw a drop in accidents. We saw a drop in fatalities caused by distracted driving. We anticipate now that the patrol and other law enforcement can write tickets now for this. Again, the idea is not to write tickets. The idea is to kind of change behavior. And we expect that this is going to even be bigger now as far as the lives saved.
I liken this to when I was a kid. The governor and I, no one ever wore seatbelts. Right. Now you don't think twice about it. And we need to make people understand that distracted driving is dangerous driving. This is just another tool in the toolbox to help change the culture. And we are a country of laws, and the fact that it is now against the law in Ohio, the majority of Ohioans are going to obey the law.
You mentioned that there was a decline in accidents and deaths, but I mean, it hit a 6-year low pretty quickly. Dom, when you see how quickly it's made, a substantial difference.
I'm not surprised because the data indicated that other states that have done this, that this would do that. But, I tell people, like I was at two high schools yesterday, and I tell them that I'm there out of love. And I mean this from the bottom of my heart. There's nothing I can do to bring my daughter back. There's nothing the governor can do to bring his daughter back. And the empathy that we have, this is what this is about. We're trying to save lives. We're trying to keep other families from going through the nightmare of losing a child. And so, this isn't about Maria. It's not about his beautiful daughter. It's about all the other kids. And, I often say, every statistic has a name, and every statistic has a family that's missing them. And this is what this is about. And, Maria's message is a message of love. And I know the governor's doing this with love in his heart, because it's the leading killer of children, and we don't want to see any more kids killed.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than losing a child. We don't want any other family to go through that. And what Dom has done is taken their great tragedy, their family's great tragedy, and it's the real push to go out and do some very meaningful things.
And Tom, speaking of that, I mean, how many schools have you spoken to, and how many simulators are out there now?
We just did 156, 55 and 56 yesterday. We initially bought 54 simulators, and we placed them around the state of Ohio, primarily with police departments. And now we've opened 3 simulator labs. We have one at the Tolles Career and Technical Center, Eastland Fairfield Career Center, and now we are excited to say we just opened one at Fort Hays. Each one features 25 state-of-the-art simulators, 16 different lesson plans.
I think sometimes we accept deaths as far as auto accidents. It's just kind of, that's the natural course of things. We don't have to accept these.
The fact that 16-year-olds are 3 times more likely than any other age group to be killed in a car crash, that's not acceptable. And as parents and grandparents, I agree, we should be screaming, that's not acceptable. We can change this. It can be fixed.
And you can learn more about Maria's message by going to 10tv.com. That's all of our time for today. Thank you so much for joining me this week for Face the State. I'm Doug Petcash. I'll see you next Sunday at 11:30. Have a great day.